So everyone knows that in Minecraft, when a player gets hurt, they lose hearts. And in order to regain those hearts, we must either A, be at full hunger, or B, use a potion that heals us. And for today, I want to talk about option A. What I want to talk about is sounding pretty weird because it really doesn't make sense, but I thought it was pretty fun to think about. And that is, with food, does the player heal damage through generating new cells or through healing already destroyed cells? Now, this is a ridiculous question because in Minecraft we are block characters where cells aren't a real thing. Well, hold on, listen. Let's say yes, that we do have cells. Which allows me to ask my question again. Does food allow the player to regenerate already destroyed cells or to produce new cells through eating? Okay, now let's inform those who don't know what cells are. And today I'm going to use Wikipedia for this because, who cares? It doesn't really matter. The cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all forms of life organisms. The term comes from Latin word cellula, meaning small room. A biological cell basically consists of a membrane cell membrane life contains material. Most cells are invisible and measurable except for highly differentiated subtypes. Some include red blood cells and gametes. Most cells are capable of replication and protein synthesis. Some types of cells motile, some are four billion. There are two types of cells, which are the eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells make up humans, while prokaryotic cells make up things like bacteria. And for those who know more than the average Joe, I'm not going too much more in depth with like the organelles, membrane bound, and ribosomes and stuff like that. I just kind of want to get to the what ifs and the theories, okay? So like the fun stuff. Topic of discussion for cells today is eukaryotic cells. These are the ones that make up animals and plants. And for future discussion, every cell that I talk about falls under the eukaryotic category. Okay, now let's say that a player gets damaged because they accidentally fall into lava. In real world scenarios, a person would get burnt and would receive intense damage to their tissue. The damage can extend deep enough to reach and destroy the skin stem cells, which are responsible for producing new skin. So after recording, I don't think I actually went too in depth into what stem cells actually are. All I said in this video is that stem cells are responsible for generating new skin, and that definitely doesn't cover a lot. Which led me to create this little voiceover narration with this drawing that I did. In this drawing, the first circle in the top left represents a stem cell, a hematopoietic stem cell to be exact. Our bodies actually contain many different stem cells, each one responsible for producing certain cells that are specialized, meaning one doing one specific task. Hematopoietic stem cells are found within the bone marrow and are responsible for producing our blood cells. This includes our red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And as you can see, the stem cell differentiates into two different cells, which are then further differentiated into our three mentioned cells. So whenever you hear stem cells, think of cells with the ability to produce new specialized cells. In real-world scenarios, a person would get burnt and receive intense damage to their tissue. The damage can extend deep enough to reach and destroy the skin stem cells, which are responsible for producing new skin. And let's look at the player. In-game, we don't actually take physical burn damage, but are instead is shown with the loss of hearts. So situation 1, we jump out of the lava, pour water on ourselves, and then eat to heal up. In the case of real-life burn victims, their cells are destroyed and can damage deep enough into the tissue to damage their stem cells. Of course, this depends on the severity of their burn, but let's call jumping into lava and crawling out a third degree. Now, with a third degree burn, we can expect damage in the dermis and subcutaneous layers. For treatment, patients would need a skin graft to the affected area or cell therapy, which is also a very interesting concept. So this isn't something someone can just heal. A third degree burn destroys the body's stem cells that are needed for regeneration. Due to this loss, the body itself cannot heal the affected area, and procedures such as skin grafts are needed. So now that we have a baseline for how burns work, let's apply that to the player. Which already kind of answers our question that yes, eating food would need to generate new cells, because the cells are destroyed and can no longer be healed or regenerated. The body would need to create new cells in order to replace them. And we know that in the event of burns, cells are destroyed beyond repair. So there's that. But, wait. If the player's hunger bar is fully depleted, they start to lose hearts, and depending on the difficulty, you only lose a certain amount. In hard mode, it will kill you, while in normal, it leaves you at half a heart. And for this, I want to focus on hard mode and the implications of dying once the hunger bar has been completely depleted. This implies that the player is in constant need of food in order to survive. Yeah, well, of course, this also applies to us in real life, so what am I getting at? It's the speed at which the player starts to lose hearts though. Once the hunger bar is completely dissipated, the player immediately starts taking damage. So what? Well, this means that the player doesn't necessarily work the same as us, obviously. Where in the event that we don't eat, it would nearly take us 2 weeks for us to die of starvation. But well, let's take a look back at our conclusion that we came to a few minutes ago. That we generate new cells whenever we take damage, that food is necessary in order for this to happen. The fact that the player needs at least some hunger bars to not take any sort of damage from starvation means that the player's body has a very high metabolic demand. One conclusion that I've come up with is that player is producing new cells at a very high rate, requiring a continuous supply of nutrients, as their body seems to consume nutrients immediately rather than store it for weeks like humans can. Now let's break this down. We've decided that the player generates new cells to recover from injuries taken. In order for this to happen, they need their hunger to be full. But now that we know that if we run out of hunger completely, we start taking damage immediately and die. In hard mode, of course. This would suggest that the player can no longer generate enough cells to keep up with the natural loss of cells throughout their body. So, this means that the player is an organism that generates new cells every moment in their life in order to keep on living. But hold on, this sounds very familiar and actually isn't that surprising, because we do it too, and like all other organisms pretty much that are multicellular. Although humans do it at a much slower rate and we keep slowing down as we age, but it's pretty much the same thing, kinda. Well, humans will constantly replace all sorts of cells within their body, such as their red blood cells, skin cells, hair follicles, and cells that line organs. However, unlike the player, we need time to replace cells and cannot generate large amounts of new cells to replace those that were destroyed in debilitating injuries. Let's take our red blood cells for example. They have an average lifespan of 3 months or 120 days. Once time is up, they are then removed from circulation and then are recycled through the body while new ones are created in the bone marrow. So if we say the player does the same thing, I'd say the average lifespan of their cells are much shorter and are produced much quickly. We've come to the conclusion that the player is able to generate new cells and is constantly doing so at such a rate that if there is no immediate food source, that their cell generation is impacted enough that they will start taking damage. Now I want to talk about another real-life example which shares some of the same characteristics as a player. And this one takes its name from Mythos, and that's the Hydra. You can see that I've highlighted the bottom part stating the Hydra is practically immortal, and that's due to the ability to regenerate. You see, the Hydra, as the name suggests, can regenerate even after being severed from its original body, or being severed. Although the player can regenerate from dismembered limbs, since that's not a thing in the game, but it shows that the player and the Hydra are similar enough in regenerative properties that they can be shoved in the same group. If the player doesn't take damage in a singular hit that exceeds the amount of hearts they have, they will not die, and as long as this condition is met, the player will never die. Definitely not due to age or damage that doesn't fully deal their amount of hearts. So this practically makes the player immortal. Well, actually, since the player can be killed, I don't know if this makes them immortal. Although Wikipedia does say ability to live forever, which the player does have, so I guess it makes them biologically immortal. Anyways, thanks for listening. Okay, love you, bye.